we were asked to present a summary of the study that we conducted on the market for vertical mobility. And I'm Doug Reinart. I'm with Porsche Consulting. I'm a partner here. I'm heading up our new Silicon Valley office. And I'm going to be joined, hopefully, by my colleague, Gregor, who I don't see in the audience, which is a little unfortunate since he's the one that authored the study. So we're gonna kind of soldier into this a little bit and see where we go. So anyway, and I guess I should also mention it's Oktoberfest. Gregor is based out of our Munich office, so I'm not liking where this may be going right now. So please bear with me as I go. And okay, I've got the clicker here. We're all set. So great. All right, so this study is based on the insights that were gleaned from over 62 international experts, tons of interviews, lots of data had been collected, sort of a classic market study from the bottoms up. We were sponsored by the German Aerospace Center, effectively the NASA equivalent there, Porsche SE, which is the family holding company of Porsche, and Volkswagen AG. Those were the sponsors for the study. The study was focused on 4 submarkets: the passenger market, so moving people around, the inspection of the remote sensing market, as it sounds. Movement of goods was also included as part of the study, and also the related supporting services for those fleets. The focus for today's numbers, because it was a very large study, and by the way, we have a few copies of it here, and I think there's a slide in the back with a barcode that you can use, or a QR code that will allow you to download this in a PDF if you'd like. So we'll make that available to you as well. And this was even a very small subset of the results and the data that was collected, so I'm happy to share more of that for any of you that are interested. So again, we're going to focus today on the passenger segment. We're going to leave goods and remote sensing and some of the service markets for another conversation, another conference maybe. Okay, so just a few words about who we are so you know who we're talking about. So Porsche Consulting is a 100% owned entity of Porsche AG. We are 500 professionals worldwide now, and we're distributed across 9 offices. We do a lot of work, as you'd imagine, supporting our organization with manufacturing, supply chain, what have you, but also tackling these new mobility topics as we move forward. A little more perspective on this. We have a bit of a unique vantage point. So within Volkswagen, which is the world's largest automotive company, its turnover is about $234 billion, I believe it was last year. 10.7 million vehicles were produced across the 12 brands, soon to be a 13th potentially. Nothing's been formally announced yet, but we, Porsche Consulting, are, again, part of Porsche, but because Porsche SE is the majority holder of the Volkswagen Corporation, so it allows us to sort of work all around the different entities and helps with our ability to kind of gather insights and understand where these best practices and the market trends are heading. So, based on that, of course, we love mobility and we love challenges, and I think, this has come up a few times. I guess, we're part of an industry that's certainly in the midst of disruption ourselves. I think clearly, Uber is, a great example of that and what's happened to the industry over the course of time. So we spend an awful lot of our time thinking about the topics that relate to vertical mobility, even if it's in the two-dimensional plane, two-dimensional existence, but certainly also now with three-dimensional. So, next year we're going to be releasing our first battery electric vehicle, the Taycan. We also have a number of vehicles, constantly experimenting with different types of future mobility solutions. Some are suitable for driving, others are more suitable, maybe in this case, for a machine to drive you around. So these are topics that we're very much focused on. So, I think it really brings us back to the kind of central tenets for our company, and we believe that a lot of these areas that we're focused on are directly relevant. There's a lot of both business knowledge and understanding, operational and production knowledge and understanding, and technology understanding that will transfer or can transfer certainly into this new vertical mobility challenge. So things like electrification, of course, we're talking a lot about that. We're going to have, Volkswagen will have probably among the largest fleet of electric vehicles deployed over the next couple of years. Porsche and others are following suit. Connected vehicles continue to evolve. All vehicles are effectively going to be Internet of Things appliances. Autonomous programs, we have our own. We have partnerships with several autonomous companies to develop that stack, and mobility services as well. I mean, we see the success of Uber and Lyft and others. I think that we're not alone among the OEMs in evaluating our play in that market in various ways, and so that continues to be a focus for us. Okay, now I'm like 7 minutes or so into this, and Greg's not here, so I'm going to need to try to reach him on the phone because he's the author of this study. So let me give him a call here. I'm very sorry about this. Let me make sure I get him here. Oh. Greg. Come on, man. Come on, I'm in San Francisco. Yeah. You weren't supposed to do that, and where's my beer?
It's backstage. We drink it later.
All right, very good. There's Greg. So I guess I'll just finish, if you don't mind.
It's fine.
So clearly, we're not allowed to do that very often, where we transport people across the world and violate all these business models. So fortunately, for the next, say, 25 or 30 years, we have the ability to focus on new business models like the vertical mobility space. So, Greg, I think I'm going to, clearly we have all these different progressions. I'll let you sort of take it from here and talk more specifically about the study if you'd like.
Fine.
Okay, and there's your...
Thank you. First of all, thanks to Doug and also Scotty to bring me here from the Oktoberfest, and thanks for the invitation. My name is Gregor Grandl. I'm senior partner at Porsche Consulting. I'm doing new mobility, digital things, and industrialization things almost 20 years. And in the field of vertical mobility, I'm within now 2 or 3 years. And at the very beginning, we asked ourselves, so is vertical mobility a relevant issue or is it hype? And if it's relevant, how big could be the market and when will it take off? I know that's always the question people ask, and we somehow said, okay, we are somehow business guys and also engineers, so we said we're going to build up a model for us where we bring all the assumptions, the technical issues, the laws and regulation issues and infrastructural things all together in a market model. And we said we also want to share this one because we think we are also somehow in developing a hype. But also it's important that we say, okay, all investors go in this field should also have the opportunity to share some of our thoughts there. And at the very beginning, when we asked ourselves, so how big could be the market, we said, okay, on the one hand, we have the helicopter, we electrified, we have electric helicopter. On the other side, we would have a flying car. And if we look on the one side, 35,000 helicopters, commercial helicopters is the installed base. The annual production, about 1,000 helicopters. If oil price going up, maybe 2,000, but this is somehow the size. The other one is 1 billion cars worldwide installed, and the annual production numbers about 80 to 100 million. But the question was for us, is it either a disruption for helicopters, or is it a disruption for cars or car industry, or where will it be at the end? And for that, we said, okay, we have to analyze different aspects like technology, where we analyzed battery technology, fuel cell, autonomous system, different flight systems, and so on. We considered infrastructure, so what is relevant and what is necessary for installing those services. How about the social acceptance, noise, and also virtual noise, that I don't like my neighbor to fly. If I'm sitting in there, I don't care about the noise. How about costs? So bringing hardware, service, infrastructure, charging, and all those things together. How much will it cost? Is it realistic that we have those prices the guys from Uber just showed right now? I've seen it from the Oktoberfest, to be honest. And also certification, maintenance, operational costs, and things like that. And last but not least, I think a very important issue, the regulatory law. And we brought all those aspects together and built it up a market model which is based on today's mobility and our projections to mobility of the future. So because today we have somehow for every specific city a footprint of mobility depending on infrastructure, depending on the footprint of a city. Do you have water there? You need bridges. Do you have mountains there? The footprint of every city is very, very different. And so the basis for our market model was today's mobility and our projection of the mobility of the future, which is a demand because people want to come from A to B. It's kind of a freedom and things like that. So this was the starting point. Based on that, we added the things you see the line up, like what do we believe in terms of technology, what do we believe in terms of infrastructure. And to make it simple, we think technology issues are solvable. Infrastructure is for sure a critical issue. We do not believe that we will have the flying car like in Fifth Element, that we allowed from every place on Earth to land and start to every place on Earth, which is a big limitation for vertical mobility because I need a first and last mile and I have to change my modes of transport, which all takes time and is not convenient and limits the use cases for vertical mobility. And another thing, social acceptance, which was also very important, the acoustic thing, because we moving air somehow, and physics, usually if you move air, it's also noise. So those were things we also considered in our models. Based on this vertical mobility assumptions, we said then, okay, how about the performance of the different solutions we can imagine? We did some scenarios of different technical solutions. So how fast it could be, how many people could sit in there, how long does it take to charge, because this is also a very important and relevant aspect if you do a market model. Can two people sit in there, 4, 10, or what is a realistic assumption, and what are operating hours? Because if you have to charge longer, you need more vehicles, your efficiency is lower, and so on. So based on those things, we then had an analysis and said, okay, how attractive is vertical mobility for those specific use cases we can assume? And last but not least, we combined also price points and willingness to pay for vertical mobility for different scenarios. So these are the pillars for our market model. And yeah, the study which we shared, those are 30 pages about. So our overall analysis were about more than 500 pages. Back in 2017 without company profiles, technology profiles, and things like that. And yeah, since then we didn't stop working on it. So in the meantime, we have even more knowledge. But just to give you an idea of the part we're going to show today. But for us, we believe it's very relevant because it's it's the first study that shows a potential of the market. So for all investors who now love the big numbers because it's 230 billion on 200,000 units, those are theoretical numbers. Those are numbers which we see as a total accessible market if all cities worldwide would have full infrastructure installed, and full infrastructure means, for example, for a big city, for the major cities, the 60 biggest cities on the world, about 100 vertiports for takeoff and landing. So we do not think that this number will be achieved within the next decade. So if we talk about 2035, the number is very different from our point of view. So this 200,000 units and 230 billion is more a theoretically achievable number if you compare it with the number of cars which we have today with infrastructure all over the place. We also did an assumption with a lower price point, which would lead to a number of 500 to 600,000 units. The market in terms of turnover would be just slightly bigger than the number we've shown here, because of the price per kilometer or per mile is lower, so the hardware costs or the hardware share would be a little higher, but the service turnover would be not that much bigger if you go to a more aggressive price point, which we do not really see in the near or mid future. To give you an indication, what price point do we believe it's realistic? The price of a taxi. This could be possible. This is a value we can believe. 35 or 40 cents per kilometer is not a number we think that it's achievable within short time or midterm. Just some aspects before I go to the figures of 2035. So I think you heard all those aspects within the presentation of the Uber guys. We believe that managing the overall journey and managing coming from A to B with changing at the vertiport, having the first and last mile is really also a ride-sharing and software business, because if you have fog, if you have weather conditions where you can fly, you have to somehow also have a solution that the mobilities provider brings you from A to B also on ground, even though it takes longer than you would like to because you are able to fly. But at the end, it's a very important aspect also to manage this overall chain. And we talked quite a lot of things about hardware, which is just the thing in the middle, the eVTOL flight. That's the most important thing in the chain, because this is the only section where we gain time. Because if we take the first and last mile, in the optimum case, the vertiport is on the direct route from A to B, so we are as fast as if we don't take a VTOL. We have then to change within a vertiport, have the transit time, we have to take off, and we have to land where we do not make any distance. So the only time where we really are faster is when we fly, and when we fly faster than we drive. So that's for us a very important aspect. But like I said, we believe that also in third dimension, vertical mobility, ground mobility provider have a quite good starting point to be in a relevant role. Another slight aspect of our analysis, I don't want to go into details, is also the aerodynamic concepts. At the moment we see battles of different concepts. We see the multicopters, which are very easy from a technical point of view, which are easier to certify, but they are slower than solutions with wings, because they can fly faster. I just want to add one comment there. From a market point of view, if you fly just 100 miles or kilometers per hour and compare it with a concept which can fly 200 kilometers per hour, the market is 30% smaller with the 100 kilometers, because you have different use cases and distances which are not attractive, because you would not change for winning just 2 minutes, because you have the risk if you change from one mode to the other one. So this is then where we believe that users will not shift from ground to vertical mobility. Another, from our point, very important dimension is the infrastructure. And here just one example that you see how big the influence can be. So in our scenarios and markets, we see if we start with about 5 vertiports, here's an example of Sao Paulo, we would assume that we have about 120 VTOLs in place. Those are routes from airport to city center and things like that, depending on the city topography and footprint. We would see an intermediate stage, an expansion where we have about 40 vertiports, and we have about 400 VTOLs then in place. And then we see an elaboration with about 100. That's comparable with the stations we have usually in cities. They have subways, so you can walk or go by bike to the subway station or to the vertiport. And this is for sure an optimum situation in terms of first and last mile. You can decide on your own if you believe that there will be 100 vertiports in your neighborhood within the next 5 years, or how long does it last. But this then will be the full elaboration of about 1,000 VTOLs. And the number is quite small, even if we come from a company that produces almost 11 million cars a year, or if you nail it down to a day, 40,000 cars per day, then the number is very small, but also VTOL is very efficient because we have no traffic jam, we fly fast, so in terms of miles per year, it's quite an efficient means of transport. To bring those things together, we think it's innovative, we think it's relevant for about 20 kilometers above. If we have heavily congested areas, it's also attractive for 10 kilometers or lower, but if the infrastructure is not sufficient, every alternative is usually faster, because if you stand in the traffic jam, also walking or bicycle would be faster. It's relevant for second and third tier connections. Just if you take the 1,000 starts and landing of the Uber colleagues and say 3 people sitting in one VTOL, then you have 1,000 people per hour. If you compare that with one lane on the road, that's about 2,500 to 3,000 people can be moved on one lane on the road. And if you compare it with a subway has about peak performance of about 20,000 to 30,000 people per hour. So that's why we believe it's just second and third tier connections, but very innovative and interesting one, and it's very flexible, and also the infrastructure is quite cheap. So that's why we like it, but we also see that compared with other means of transport, it's an additional thing and not solving all our mobility problems which we have in cities. Coming to my last 2 slides, what do we think about 2035? We believe that the commercial services tests will be sooner, but we believe commercial services will start 2025. And we believe that until 2035, we see about 21 billion in terms of market turnover. That includes hardware, services, and other services like insurance, like MRO and things like that. And we see about 15,000 units. This is within cities. And we see an additional potential of about 8,000 VTOLs for city to city. So if we connect 2 cities, and about additional 11 billion also for city to city mobility. So this is, if we add those up, 32 billion and 23,000 units if we take both use cases within cities and intra-city use cases. For sure, we also did some scenarios. The progressive scenario, which you can see, it's up to 58,000 and 43,000 units in 2035. For this use case, we think we would need also autonomous system, because then pilots would run out, because I think we have in the US about 30 to 35,000 helicopter pilots. For sure, it might be a different license, but we think globally pilots would be a problem in the progressive scenario, or an issue to be solved, and that's why I believe the progressive scenario needs autonomous systems. The conservative scenario, which is for some of you maybe a dramatic low number, is the reason behind that. If we do not solve the acoustic issue, and if we do not have really social acceptance that people believe us that it's not a service for rich people, I think regulators and also governments and cities will not build up the infrastructure, and this will be a very, very slow development. The most important aspects for developing of the market, we believe, is the starting point. This is the first one. The second one is how fast the technology itself, so air traffic management, the hardware, but also the infrastructure develops. And the third one is how fast cities adopt to vertical mobility, because we will see pioneer cities, they will test it, but then the question is how fast first cities or second cities will follow, and how many cities will build up infrastructure for having those services. So that's an overview from our side. We would also have a short video on the pop-up concept, which is done by our sister Ital Design and Airbus and Audi. I don't know, we can show it, but I also can skip it because we are already behind schedule, and I think we directly jump to Q&As. Maybe we catch up a little bit.